Have you ever felt something off while watching Pokémon, like the pacing, the tone, the very fabric of the story shifted after a particular moment? Think back to those early episodes where the world around Ash seemed so normal, until he was struck by lightning. I have a theory. That moment, the bike accident didn't leave Ash unscathed. Days later, he was found unconscious and rushed to the hospital, slipping into a deep coma. What followed wasn't a story of adventure, but the fractured dreams of a comatose mind. As Ash lay trapped in his unconscious state, heavy medication began to warp the terrifying world around him into something more idyllic. This is why Team Rocket, once menacing villains, became laughable caricatures. His brain reprogrammed them into harmless distractions, stabilizing the dreamscape. This fabricated reality allowed Ash to pursue his ultimate fantasy, becoming a Pokémon master. From that point on, the show reflects Ash's subconscious struggles. His adventures, his triumphs, and even his setbacks are all mechanisms to keep his mind from waking. Should Ash ever realize his reality is a dream, the shock could cause irreparable brain damage. To escape, he must confront and dismantle his mental barriers, one by one. Evidence of this coma world is everywhere. Notice how Ash avoids bicycles? His trauma manifests as a subconscious phobia. His physical appearance never changes, because time has no meaning in his fabricated world. The perfect balance of society, the universal kindness, the seamless systems of government, are hallmarks of a world Ash constructed to feel safe. Every Pokémon Center staffed by Nurse Joy, every town policed by Officer Jenny, are echoes of people Ash knew in real life. They serve as anchors, comforting constants amidst the chaos of his mind. Even Gary, his rival, becomes a Professor Ash's idealized endpoint for someone he envied, a benchmark of success he quietly wished for himself. Ash's traveling companions are fragmented pieces of his psyche. Brock represents Ash's repressed sexuality. Ash fell into his coma a virgin, burdened by feelings he never fully understood. Brock's constant failures with women reflect Ash's inability to act on these feelings. His stay with Professor Ivy, vague and haunting, symbolizes Ash's subconscious trying to suppress this growing discomfort, only to have it resurface when Brock returns, unwilling to speak of his time away. Misty is another aspect of Ash's first love, distant and unattainable. She is the innocence of his affection, an idealized figure shaped by his subconscious, one that fades as Ash's dreamscape evolves. Each new companion represents another aspect of Ash's identity, surfacing as his mind tries to reconcile the growing complexities of his desires and fears. The Pokémon battles, the leagues, the victories, all of it is carefully curated by his subconscious to sustain the illusion. How else can you explain why Ash's fame never carries from region to region, or why every encounter seems strangely disconnected from the last? The rivals, too, embody parts of his psyche, each challenging him in a different way. This isn't just a story of dreams. It's a desperate escape from reality. Ash's subconscious built a world where his dreams could thrive, but the cost is immense. Should Ash confront the truth that his world is a fragile, crumbling illusion, he risks everything. Until then, he wanders, chasing badges, companions, and fleeting glory, forever lost in the labyrinth of his mind. He believed that relationships could only flourish after one had truly matured. But in practice, he found himself paralyzed. Lacking real-world experience, he clung to an idealized version of the pushy, sharp-tongued Misty he once knew. When he refused to let her keep Togepi, it wasn't about control, it was a desperate attempt to preserve her as she was in his mind. Her eventual fading into the background, a slow and haunting retreat, reflected the trauma of losing something he had come to need. This pattern repeated, growing darker with each iteration. Whenever someone close to him began to outgrow their innocence or threatened to mature too quickly, they vanished only to be replaced by someone fresher, more naive. Ash's subconscious couldn't handle the progression. It sought to trap him in a world where time stood still, cycling companions endlessly, to keep his illusion intact. Gary was different. Gary was what Ash wanted to be: confident, successful, and able to settle into a normal life. But Gary's existence wasn't an encouragement. It was a cruel, subconscious trap. Ash needed Gary to validate his world, to prove that someone could succeed within the rules of this fragile construct. Without that validation, Ash might begin questioning the reality around him, a risk his mind couldn't afford. Awareness of the coma would shatter the dream, and with it, Ash's mind. The legendary Pokémon Ash kept encountering weren't random, they were signals, cries from his subconscious urging him to push forward, to escape. They represented greatness, the potential he still held, even in his broken state. But every time, Ash recoiled, too complacent to make the final push. He let them slip through his fingers, content to remain within the confines of his dreamscape. Team Rocket became an embodiment of Ash's inner turmoil, qualities he despised, but couldn't deny. Jesse's vanity and manipulation mirrored his darker impulses, while James's gullibility and implied homosexuality reflected vulnerabilities Ash couldn't reconcile with. Meowth, the twisted innocence of the group, was a direct echo of Ash's corrupted inner child. Meowth's ability to speak wasn't just a quirk, it was Ash's subconscious forcing him to confront these fractured parts of himself. Giovanni loomed large, a shadowy figure atop the organization, not as an external villain, but as a symbol of Ash's unresolved issues with his father. Ash's mind demonized him, casting him as the head of an oppressive force. Perhaps there was a real Team Rocket in Ash's world, but it's unlikely his father truly led them. Instead, the split between Ash's parents weighed heavily on him. He blamed himself as much as he blamed his father, and his journey began as an escape from that fractured home. Even Team Rocket's penchant for cross-dressing had meaning. It was Ash's way of experimenting with the edges of his identity, a place where vanity and sexuality could play without consequence. But as his subconscious decided it wasn't for him, these moments faded, leaving behind only fragments of the experiment. New companions like May and Max took on symbolic roles. May as the ambitious ID, Max as the ego. They worked for a time, but Ash's repressed teenage sexuality always bubbled back to the surface. Dawn, on the other hand, was different. She wasn't just another piece of the cycle, she was Ash giving himself permission to love again. Unlike Misty, she was less violent, more compatible with who Ash had become in his dreamscape. She was a safer, softer projection, one that hinted at the faint hope of connection in a world that was increasingly isolating. But every new addition, every recycled aspect, only tightened the noose of his subconscious prison. Ash's mind was a labyrinth, and though the doors were there, signaled by the legendary Pokémon, the fragments of himself in Team Rocket, the shifting faces of his companions, he couldn't bring himself to step through. There's something unsettling about how Ash interacts with those around him, isn't there? Consider how May and Misty both rejected Brock's behavior outright, yet Dawn, strangely, just shrugged it off, almost as if her presence was less grounded, in reality less human. Tracy the breeder was different too. He was a glimpse into Ash's possible future, a version of himself that Ash couldn't bear to accept. Tracy was shipped off to work with Professor Oak, the idealized father figure Ash's mind clung to. When Tracy disrupted the dynamic Ash had constructed with his companions, his presence was quickly erased, replaced by a rival more threatening, more fitting to Ash's fractured psyche. And then there's Pikachu, Ash's humanity in physical form. Pikachu is more than a companion. It's the tether to what little remains of Ash's true self. This is why episodes where they are separated are so profoundly desperate. Ash will even collaborate with Team Rocket, those shadowy fragments of himself, to save Pikachu. Yet, Team Rocket's ultimate goal is to deliver Pikachu to Giovanni, the looming father figure Ash both fears and loathes. They want to strip away Ash's humanity and place it in the hands of the man he blames for his fractured family and his mother's loneliness. Ash couldn't allow Pikachu to evolve. To do so would be to challenge his entire self-concept, something far too raw, far too dangerous for his fragile mind to confront while trapped in the coma. The narrator's voice, ever present, is more than a storytelling device. It's Ash's higher mind, guiding him through the dream, recapping his struggles, and hinting at the lessons he must learn to escape. Team Rocket's disguises, so laughably obvious, are never truly believed, not by the part of Ash that wants to escape. On some level, he knows it's always them. But the Ash who wants to remain lost in this dream world sabotages himself, pretending not to see. This inner conflict, one part of him craving freedom, the other terrified of what lies outside, drives the cycle of endless conflict, creating more chaos in the hope of eventually finding peace. As time passes, Ash's world grows stranger. Early in the series, there were glimpses of animals, fish in Cerulean City's aquarium, or the Pokédex comparing Pikachu to a rat. But over time, these references vanish, replaced entirely by Pokémon. The real animals no longer matter to Ash's psyche. They've been overwritten. His memories of the real world are fading, his mind deteriorating as the coma drags on. Machinery powered by electric Pokémon. Ecosystems built entirely around fantastical creatures. These are signs that his grip on reality is slipping, replaced by the rules of his fabricated world. Even Ash's Pokémon carry the weight of his inner struggles. Charmander, for instance, symbolizes his suppressed sex drive. Initially, it's small and manageable, but as it evolves into Charizard, it becomes a raging inferno of disobedience, something Ash has no idea how to control. Bulbasaur represents his resistance to change, refusing to evolve and nearly staying behind altogether unless confronted. Squirtle, on the other hand, embodies his willingness to follow others despite appearing to lead. It's part of a group, yet somehow stands apart strongest, but still one of many. Butterfree, released into the wild, was the embodiment of Ash's crushing loneliness. Its departure marked one of his rare moments of acceptance, a brief glimpse at his ability to let go. The bird Pokémon he collects symbolize his recklessness, his constant willingness to gamble and sacrifice for victory, often at great personal cost. Even the act of trading Pokémon becomes sinister, a subconscious way of reshuffling his identity, as though trading away pieces of himself in the hope of becoming whole. Yet, every trade, every evolution, every journey deeper into his world only tightens the grip of the dream, pulling him further from the reality he can no longer remember. It's as if Ash's mind is playing an endless sinister game with itself, shuffling his problems onto others, only to snatch them back moments later. Trading Pokémon becomes a macabre ritual, a desperate attempt to offload parts of himself he can't face, only for his subconscious to pull them back, forcing him to grapple with what he tried to escape. Every trainer he encounters reflects a piece of his fragmented psyche, their Pokémon mirroring his fears, regrets, or unresolved issues. Team Rocket's coughing and Ekans, for instance, were manifestations of his subconscious's ability to change. Their eventual evolutions were milestones, symbolic of Ash's mind breaking through barriers he had unconsciously erected. But its never simple change only comes when his inner turmoil is cornered and subdued. Gym leaders are more menacing, more primal embodiments of his most deeply rooted traits. Each one grows stronger and more complex as he battles them, symbolizing Ash's struggle against the darker facets of his identity. What begins as straightforward combat evolves into intricate team battles and contests. It's as though Ash's internal conflicts are compounding, demanding increasingly convoluted strategies to suppress. The very Pokémon he uses to triumph over these foes represent past struggles he has already conquered, repurposed to combat new horrors. But Ash can't hold on to these victories. His mind won't allow it. Each time he assembles a team too powerful, too dominant, it slips through his fingers. A tournament looms, he fights his way to the top, and then he's forced to start anew in a strange land. The part of Ash that clings to this dream world, the version of himself that fears waking more than anything, sends his most overpowered companions to Professor Oak. A cruel cycle, designed to strip him of comfort, ensuring his battles remain fresh and his struggles unending. Ash's rivals are the most chilling manifestations of this endless war. They aren't just competitors, they are potential futures, visions of who Ash could become. Each rival is older, stronger, and more fully realized. Gary, once someone from the real world, was warped into a godlike figure within Ash's dreamscape. Yet even Gary changes, bending to Ash's subconscious will, becoming a professor, a role Ash deeply desires but cannot achieve. But the real horror lies in Paul, a shadowy double of Ash. Paul is relentless, cruel, and driven, everything Ash must confront to break free from his coma. He's the embodiment of Ash's subconscious, urging him to wake, no matter the cost. Paul's brutality, his harshness, is a reflection of the despairing part of Ash that recognizes this dream world as a prison, even as another part clings to its safety. And then there are the legendary Pokémon specters of divinity haunting Ash's endless journey. They are promises of power, symbols of the unattainable, and cruel reminders of Ash's stasis. They loom over him, untouchable, pushing him toward an awakening he may never truly reach. Finally, there's Mew, a harrowing twist in the tale. It's no mere creature but a representation of an external force, a new experimental treatment in the real world. Electrical impulses and machines prod at Ash's mind, tearing down the last of his defenses. Each encounter with Mew isn't just a battle, it's a desperate, subconscious fight against the creeping edges of reality, threatening to unravel the fragile dreamscape Ash has built around himself. Ash's world is crumbling, but not fast enough. Every battle, every rival, every release of a beloved Pokémon is a crack in the foundation. Yet he clings to his constructed reality, terrified of the moment the cracks become an unstoppable collapse. The original Pokémon movie twists itself into something far more sinister within the confines of Ash's fractured mind. Mutwo and his clones weren't fantastical beings, they were cold, clinical manifestations of the treatments attacking his mental defenses. These clones weren't bound by the rules of Ash's dream world. They were ruthless, brutish mirrors of his Pokémon, tearing through his carefully constructed illusions. They didn't play by Ash's rules because they weren't part of Ash. They were the real world clawing its way into his sanctuary, forcing his mind to confront its fabricated existence. The treatments were working, but at a cost. The jolts of electricity began to corrode Ash's nervous system. The damage seeped into his dream, warping his subconscious to reflect his deteriorating body. He became petrified, a statue in his own mind, as if the very essence of him was crumbling into lifeless stone. His mother, desperate and grieving, ended the treatments before they consumed him entirely, but not without leaving scars. His dream world adapted, suppressing the trauma. Pikachu's once potent electric attacks became harmless, reduced to slapstick and relief, no longer capable of truly touching him. The world continued to shift, twisting into a slower unraveling. Each victory pulled Ash deeper into the void. At last he defeated the Elite Four, but instead of triumph, he found emptiness. One by one, his friends vanished, their existence dissolving like smoke. All that remained was darkness, and from that darkness, Pikachu emerged, glowing faintly, a fragment of his remaining humanity. They embraced one final time, their bond flickering as Ash's dream world collapsed. In the real world, Delia sat by Ash's bedside. Her hope had withered over the years, eroded by time and the inevitability of loss. A grim-faced doctor stood nearby, murmuring about the insurance running out and the lack of brain activity. Through tears, she made the impossible choice. In Ash's fading dream, he whispered his final words, "I want to be the very best." His voice faltered, his vision dimmed. In those last moments, he saw his mother through the haze of tears. Her hope had broken, shattered by the unbearable weight of outliving her only child. But there is always another thread in the tapestry of time. As Ash muttered his final words, there came a shift. The fountain of time twisted, the currents dragging him downstream. He stood not before Gary, but a hollow, voiceless reflection of himself. The narrator, once his guide, now his jailer, spoke coldly. Now you can finally escape the prison of your own mind. One by one, his friends reappeared, only to dissolve into versions of himself, their cheers merging into a deafening cacophony. Ash fought, his Pokémon, everyone he had ever befriended, at his side. Together, they waged war against his shadowy doppelganger. With a final surge of resolve, he broke free, awakening in the sterile confines of a hospital room. His parents slept at his side, their faces aged and weary. Ash couldn't speak, his voice stolen by years of disuse. His body felt foreign, frail, and broken, but Ash pushed forward. Through agonizing physical therapy, he reclaimed his strength. Rehabilitation, Pokémon became his new companions as he trained harder than ever, this time fighting not in dreams, but in reality. Eventually, he walked again, an older, wiser Ash. He set out on another journey, the echoes of his past adventures haunting his every step. When he reached the professor's lab, it was almost poetic. He was late again, and only one Pokémon remained. As he reached for his new companion, memories surged, and he remembered it all. The faces of his old friends, their laughter, their sacrifices. They were gone, lost forever to the dream. He realized this new world was colder, harsher, and undeniably real. Pokémon and people alike fell victim to the cruelty of life, and he too bore the marks of time. But Ash vowed to honor the dream and the friends who had shaped it. With fire in his heart and his new partner at his side, he whispered his promise to the shadows of his past. I will be the very best, this time for real.